Do you agree and do you support with the main thrust of that report, which basically is aimed at reducing duplication between the federal and state governments?
G'day, Kieran. Well, of course. Who doesn't want to see a reduction in red and green tape? But we want to do that in a way that doesn't lower the protections available for our environment, and that can be done. And in fact, Professor Samuel has mapped out a pathway forward to achieve that. There are a number of sensible recommendations in there which get the balance right between the need to grow our economy and also to protect our environment. And I think we should follow those recommendations.
One of the recommendations is for a federal independent regulator, you know, a cop on the beat, so to speak. But the federal minister, when I spoke to her last week, rejected that idea. What's your view on it?
Well, there's no point having strong environmental protections if they're not going to be enforced. And the community needs to have confidence that the laws are going to be enforced without fear or favour. That's why you have an independent cop on the beat. We've done it in New South Wales. In fact, such a reform was introduced by a coalition government. And I think it'd be a great legacy for a coalition government in Canberra to implement a similar program. What could be more important to a Conservative government than upholding the rule of law, Kieran?
Without an independent regulator, are you concerned that the changes would weaken our environmental protections?
Well, what we know is that we need to have a robust cop on the beat when it comes to protecting our environment. That's exactly why we've got an EPA in New South Wales. The community wants to ensure that we're having the same standards enforced in New South Wales. As I said at the start, why have environmental protections if you're not going to enforce them? And that's what a strong independent regulator would provide.
The federal government, from what I've been told by the minister and others, both on air but also reading their response to the Samuel report, is basically they don't want to have another layer of bureaucracy. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I mean, it's not another level of bureaucracy. It's an independent body that is there enforcing the law. We've got it when it comes to our judiciary. We've got it in a whole range of other areas of government. So what's the problem with having it in the area of the environment to enforce and uphold our environmental laws? It's good for the environment. It's also good for business because we can provide certainty across the board, across the different states and territories as to how our laws will be enforced. The important thing to remember, Kieran, is that nature doesn't recognise state boundaries. So having a different regulatory environment for every state and territory is not only bad for the environment, it's bad for business who operate across those state and territory borders.
And in that context, have you spoken to your state counterparts? What's their view when it comes to this issue?
Well, I've spoken to a number of my state and territory counterparts, and broadly, we're all in agreement. We want to see a less duplication. We want to see less green and red tape, but we don't want to see an erosion of our environmental protections. We're all on a unity ticket there.
So basically, they support an independent regulator, as you do.
Well, I'm not going to speak for the other states and territories, but New South Wales's view is what do we have to fear from a strong environmental cop on the beat enforcing the laws that we have in place? We've got one in New South Wales. It delivers good outcomes for the environment and it provides certainty for business, and that's a good thing for everyone.
On a couple of other issues, just quickly, your colleague Dominic Perrottet is clearly getting annoyed with some of the public criticism emerging in the press about his push for tax reform. He said today, in Canberra, they'd come up with more Prime Ministers than policy ideas. If we're actually fair dinkum about making change, we would be working together. Is there really any hope of compromise, given the sort of exchanges we're seeing right now on that issue?
Well, we've got a reformist treasurer who wants to work with the Commonwealth, and what we're asking is not too great. We want a federation that supports further growth and prosperity for the people of New South Wales and the other states and territories. And what we've identified recently is that we've got a number of inefficient taxes that aren't delivering that outcome. There's an opportunity to reform. As they say, Kieran, never waste a crisis, and we're going through a major crisis at the moment. What we need to be doing is creating new jobs and growing our prosperity in this very difficult time. So now is the time for reform. Let's not squib it. We want to work with the Commonwealth to get a great outcome for New South Wales and indeed the country.
He was clearly annoyed at the suggestion that the states weren't coming up with ideas, given he did commission the Thodey review, a 12-month review with quite substantial recommendations there, Minister.
Well, Dom Perrottet is one of the great thinkers on the Liberal side of politics, and he's commissioned this great report undertaken by David Thodey. It's recommended a number of opportunities where we can improve economic growth, improve productivity, and increase the prosperity of the people of New South Wales. We should take the opportunity, grab it, and deliver a great outcome for our state and indeed the country.
New South Wales Minister for Energy and Environment, Matt Kean. Thanks so much. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Kieran.